Please let me stay just for today. Mom said I'm not family because I have a developmental disorder.
These unbelievable words came from my granddaughter's mouth. Today is her birthday. She should be happily eating cake with her family, yet she's forced to say such things. I hugged her small body tightly. My name is June. I'm 58 years old. My husband, also 58, is nearing retirement from his office job. I quit my job at 55, and now I'm a stay-at-home wife. I spend my days gardening, reading comics I've loved since childhood, and watching movies. I've had my fair share of experiences when I was younger, but now they all seem like good memories. I have a son who's married and lives in a nearby apartment with his wife and 2 daughters. The elder granddaughter is 8, and the younger is 6. Having raised only one son, being around 2 girls feels new to me. My daughter-in-law, Nancy, is a cheerful person, and I think our mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship is pretty good. Nancy often leaves her 2 daughters with me since I quit my job.
Sorry, June. I have a lunch date with my mom friends today. Could you watch the girls? A high school friend is visiting from the countryside. I'm going shopping.
The reasons vary, but she frequently leaves the girls with me to go out. I've never refused because I enjoy spending time with my granddaughters. Nancy is a stay-at-home mom. My son is 35 and a department manager at a fairly large company. He must be earning a decent salary. Some of my old friends say, lucky her, leaving her kids with her mother-in-law and going out all the time as a stay-at-home mom, but I don't know if once every 10 days is often or not. That day, Nancy brought her 2 daughters over. The elder is called Amy, and the younger, Lily. Lily, resembling her mother, is a bright child. When she sees me, she always shouts, "Yeah, Grandma," and hugs around my waist. In contrast, Amy, the elder, silently nods her head so slightly you might not even notice.
That girl is so unfriendly,
Nancy often says, lightly flicking her daughter's head, which is a routine. It's not like she never greets, I don't think she needs to be flicked. Sorry, June. There's a concert by an artist I've always liked today. I might come back a bit late, Nancy says, dressed up more than usual.
Oh, that's why you're dressed up today. All right, go and enjoy yourself.
My old friends would probably say, lucky her, going to a concert while leaving her kids with her mother-in-law. Well, shall we make some pancakes? I'll help. I want mine with whipped cream. Lily says, eagerly cute. Ignoring her sister, Amy then says, Grandma, can I read comics?
Of course. I'll call you when the pancakes are ready.
Nancy might call her unfriendly, but I don't mind Amy's independent nature. It's probably because I'm the same type. When I stopped working and Nancy started leaving the girls with me, they often played with drawing. Despite being 2 years apart, Amy was astonishingly good at drawing. Having always liked comics, I consider myself to have a decent eye for art. And I was even impressed by her skill. Her drawings weren't the typical doll-like illustrations most girls make. She drew characters with a real sense of dimension. Wow, Amy, you're really good at drawing. I couldn't help but praise her enthusiastically.
But Daddy and Mommy said her drawings aren't cute,
said Lily, who had just turned 5. Probably feeling jealous because I praised her sister so much. Her drawings were typical for her age, big-eyed doll-like figures, which were cute in their own way. I felt sorry for Amy, given her parents' lack of artistic appreciation. Amy, you're incredibly talented. Grandma's amazed. You know, your dad was never good at drawing or crafts even as a kid. He just can't see how wonderful your drawings are. Amy smiled shyly at my words. She rarely showed her emotions, which made her smile all the more precious. Maybe her drawings are too sophisticated for her age, which might be why her parents don't find them cute, but I couldn't understand why they wouldn't praise her. When Lily fell asleep, I asked Amy if she wanted to read comics. I haven't read many comics, she replied. I've always loved comics and have a large collection at home. My son wasn't much into comics as a child, and I've never heard that Nancy liked them either. Naturally, they wouldn't have bought many for their kids. I took Amy to the room with the bookshelves.
Feel free to read anything you like. Grandma will make lunch in the meantime.
While I prepared noodles for lunch, Amy stayed in the room without making a sound. Even when I called her for lunch, there was no response. When I went to fetch her, she was engrossed in reading a comic. During lunch, she talked about the comic. It was surprising since she's usually not very talkative. Even Lily remarked, "Sis is talking a lot." That's weird. It must have been a rare occasion.
I'm not great with books full of text, but comics are really fun and interesting.
Hearing her say that made me, a comic lover, very happy. After lunch, Amy continued reading comics until dinner. Since that day, whenever Amy comes over, she heads straight to the bookshelf and spends her time reading comics alone. I was happy to see her interest in comics, but then I was surprised when Lily said, "Sis is boring, always reading comics." She even bought a comic with her allowance and got in trouble with Mom. I think it's fine for her to buy comics with her allowance. I remember how hard it was to have my interests dismissed by my parents as a child. I'm definitely on Amy's side. One day, Nancy asked me to make a rice snack for Lily's birthday party. I bought a cute stationery set online for her gift and prepared the rice snacks before heading to my son and Nancy's house. Amy laid out her new sparkly stationery set on the empty space of the table. With a delighted expression, she exclaimed to her sister, "Isn't it great? This is mine, so you can't use it, Lily." Her childlike excitement was palpable. I regretted not buying something for Amy as well. "I hope you're looking forward to your birthday present too, Amy," I said, trying to make her feel included. But Nancy's cold response took me by surprise. "I don't think we'll be having a party for Amy." I was surprised by Nancy's cold manner of speaking. Amy isn't really into parties. She's quiet even today, isn't she? Indeed, Amy was a quiet and reserved child, but I wondered if any child would really dislike being celebrated.
It's not exciting to give her presents. She doesn't show much joy. That's not something you should say. Some kids are just not good at expressing their feelings.
I defended Amy, feeling a connection with her since I, too, had often been misunderstood due to my own reserved nature. Even my son chimed in.
But Amy doesn't have much charm or grace for a girl. It's a bit concerning.
His words, though not ill-intended, could be quite hurtful to a child. Amy, with her inscrutable expression, just continued to pick at her French fries, seemingly unaffected. About a month later, during the summer break, Nancy arrived with Amy in tow.
"June, I hate to ask, but could you look after Amy for a couple of days?"
"What's going on?" I asked, surprised by the sudden request.
"I'm heading back to my parents' house, but if Amy is there, my mom will have a lot to say." "Like what?" "Just what my husband said the other day. That Amy lacks charm and grace for a girl, and then it's all about how I'm not raising her right." "That's awful."
I sympathized, knowing Amy wouldn't want to be in such an environment. So, I agreed to take care of her. "Okay, you can say her grandparents wanted to take Amy on a trip," I suggested, making the best of the situation. Amy, treated like an inconvenience right in front of her, remained expressionless, giving nothing away.
"Grandma, are we going on a trip?"
Amy asked after her mother had left.
"Oh, no. That was just a fib. Sorry, okay? Would you like to go on a trip?"
"No. I'd rather read comics at your house."
"Does your mom hate comics?"
I recalled something Lily had mentioned before.
"I don't know. But she says reading comics makes you dumb."
I was surprised that such an old-fashioned view still existed, especially coming from my daughter-in-law. Nevertheless, Amy and I spent a pleasant 2 days together. She was engrossed in her comics most of the time, but I enjoyed hearing her thoughts on them. Some were perhaps a bit mature for a girl her age, but I didn't object, remembering how much I hated being restricted as a child. During dinner, Amy was so caught up in talking about the comics that she almost forgot to eat. My husband, a bit sunburned from golfing, watched Amy and chuckled, she's just like you. Normally not much of a talker, but when it comes to her favorite things, she doesn't care if anyone's listening or not. Just like you. Well, they are grandmother and granddaughter, so it's not weird they're alike. When Nancy came to pick her up, Amy seemed like she didn't want to leave. It was both pleasing and a bit sad for me.
Feel free to come over anytime,
I said, and she smiled broadly and nodded. What's with you?
You're all smiles for Grandma.
I thought to myself, she could have chosen a nicer way to say that. Right after she said that, Amy's expression went blank. For Amy's birthday, though we weren't having a party, I wanted to give her a present. So, I went to the town center and bought her a sketchbook and a set of 120 colored pencils, all wrapped up as a gift. I also bought Lily a character-themed notebook and a set of colored pencils. Today being a weekday, the kids were probably still at school, so I thought I'd go home and make some more sushi rolls. Walking home from the bus, I saw a small figure in my garden. Sometimes kids from the neighborhood pick flowers from my flower beds. They say flower picking isn't really a crime, but as someone who takes care of them, I can't just overlook it. As I hurried home, I found Amy standing alone in the garden. Amy, what's up? Are you here alone? I asked, surprised. She replied in a small voice, can I stay here tonight, just for today?
Sure, but what about your mom? Did you come here alone? Mom said I'm not family because I have a developmental disorder.
What do you mean? I've heard the term developmental disorder quite often recently.
At the doctor's, they said I have a developmental disorder. Mom said she doesn't need a child like that. Oh my, that's terrible. Let's go inside the house,
I said, taking her hand. Honestly, I didn't really understand what a developmental disorder was. Was it some kind of abnormality? She didn't seem like it. I looked it up on my smartphone and learned that developmental disorders include ADHD, autism, and learning disabilities. ADHD involves restlessness, lack of attention, and concentration. Autism means difficulties in communication, lack of interest in others, limited facial expressions, and preferring solitary play. Amy might fall into this category. In learning disabilities, there's no issue with intelligence, but there can be difficulties in reading. It's apparently caused by a variance in brain development from birth. The more I read, the more I remembered kids in my class who might have had such conditions. Kids who couldn't sit still during class, or who wouldn't talk to anyone. Maybe they'd be diagnosed with developmental disorders today. Even I wasn't great at communication and preferred playing alone. That quiet kid from my childhood became a chatty and cheerful mother of 3 when we met at a reunion. Maybe these are just personality traits? It's hard to say since so much about the brain is still unknown. There's also a gray area where a child may not be diagnosed with a developmental disorder but still shows tendencies. It all seemed very complicated. The real problem is when a child is diagnosed and the parents can't accept it. That's the case with Amy. But to say a child isn't family just because they're diagnosed with a developmental disorder? That's unthinkable. I took out a cookie tin and poured some milk, saying, I'm gonna make a quick call, and moved to a room where Amy couldn't hear me.
Ah, she went to your place, huh? Well, that makes sense. She doesn't really have anywhere else to go,
Nancy said over the phone, not sounding worried at all.
What do you mean by that? Amy's telling me you said kids with developmental disorders aren't part of the family.
I was pretty angry.
I never said that. I just said I didn't want a child with a developmental disorder in my family. Isn't that basically the same thing? Don't you think saying that would hurt the child? I said it as a joke. But then she just takes it seriously and leaves. She's always like this. She never gets jokes, and it's exhausting being with her.
I think that might be characteristic of the autism type of developmental disorder.
The school teacher said she wasn't doing well in class, so they suggested getting her diagnosed for a developmental disorder. I couldn't believe it, but when we did, she was diagnosed. I was shaken up, and then she comes up saying it's her birthday today.
Like I could care about that right now. I couldn't help but feel a bit of sympathy, but if it's a brain function issue from birth, it's not her fault.
So you're saying it's my fault?
Oh, I get it.
My mother probably blames me for having a child with a disability.
Nancy got so worked up over her own words that I couldn't handle her.
For now, I'll take care of Amy here. She can go to school from here, and you should take some time to calm down and rest.
I hung up after saying that. I informed my husband about the situation over the phone, which was basically a fait accompli. Amy's gonna be living with us for a while, with Grandma and Grandpa, I told her. Even when I said that, Amy didn't seem sad or angry. Her expression was hard to read. Is it because my brain's messed up? She asked, startling me.
You're not messed up at all, Amy. You're a cute girl who loves comics and is good at drawing.
That's a lie, right? Mom always says I'm not cute. She says I'm dumb for believing everything I'm told. Shouldn't I believe what I'm told? Why do people say things you're not supposed to believe?
It's not a lie.
I realized this child was deeply hurt, even though she didn't cry. Feeling this way, I hugged my granddaughter. I think Mom prefers Lily. Dad might miss me a little, but I like it better here. There are lots of comics. It's sad to hear a child say such things.
Then let's live here together. You can read as many comics as you like, but you have to go to school and study too, okay?
When I said that, Amy asked, "Really?" and smiled happily. My husband brought home a cake for Amy's birthday after work. He knew more about developmental disorders than I did, having discussed it at his company. He said, there's a right place for everyone, and when they're in the right job, they can really excel.
It's not a disease, so it won't go away, but with understanding from others and effort from the person, life can be much easier.
He explained. That night, my son came over with school supplies and textbooks for Amy. He had researched developmental disorders and accepted that his daughter was diagnosed with one. He thought it was better for her to live with me, her grandmother, for now.
I'm sorry, Amy. I'll come get you when things settle down,
he said, patting her head. But he never came to get Amy. 3 months after Amy started living with us, Nancy's affair came to light. She had left Lily at home alone that day and went out. Lily nearly choked on a candy while home alone, but my son, who came home early from work, found her. Fortunately, he was nearby and got home earlier than usual. They called an ambulance, and she was taken to the hospital, where she was okay, but they couldn't get a hold of Nancy. I rushed to the hospital with Amy after getting the call. We were relieved to find Lily safe when Nancy showed up, looking pale.
Where were you, leaving Lily alone like that? I was having dinner with some mom friends.
But it didn't seem likely that dinner with other moms would take all evening. Of course, my son questioned that.
I just got caught up in conversation.
I wished she had left the kids with me if it was going to be like this. Maybe Nancy was hesitant to show her face because of what happened with Amy. Suddenly, Amy blurted out. Mom, why do you smell different when you go out? Not like our home shampoo or soap.
Huh, what?
Everyone was momentarily confused by her question.
What are you talking about, Amy? You never get the atmosphere, do you?
Nancy was clearly flustered.
I was at the health spa. Maybe that's why. If it was the spa, why didn't you take Lily too?
It's not just today. It's always like this, Amy said, and my son was the first to catch on. Maybe he had some suspicions.
You're cheating, aren't you? What? How can you say that? That's impossible. Don't take what Amy says seriously.
That's when I remembered something about developmental disorders.
Come to think of it, people with developmental disorders can be sensitive to sounds and smells. They can really dislike unfamiliar scents.
I mentioned, and the atmosphere turned icy.
Not just Amy, but you too, June. You don't get the atmosphere. It's not my fault. My husband is all about his work, leaving everything about the house and kids to me. I get stressed too. And now, being told my child has a developmental disorder. Think about me for once.
Nancy yelled back defensively.
Amy had developmental issues even before you started leaving them with me and going out frequently.
I wondered what this daughter-in-law was talking about.
So, you were cheating while leaving your daughters with June. I'm not saying I'm blameless, but that's no excuse for your affair.
Realizing there was no escape, Nancy burst into tears and got scolded by a nurse for causing a commotion in the hospital. I never suspected a thing. Never thought my daughter-in-law would leave her kids with me to meet other men. Was I unwittingly aiding her affair? Turns out, the other man was a high school classmate she reconnected with at a reunion. He ran a bar and had time during the day, so they met at hotels then. Nancy was berated by her own mother for cheating and risking losing her kids in a divorce, and she wasn't allowed to return home. Now, she's working a night job that includes lodging. After the divorce, my son and his 2 daughters moved in with us. For a while, my son was down, but with my encouragement that he had a responsibility to raise his daughters, he started to look forward. Lily, still young, missed her mother and went to meet her, but Amy never once expressed a desire to see her mother. Gradually, the visits decreased, and Lily stopped talking about her mother. My son shared about the last visit. She's got a new guy, probably no good. She was really thin, with bruises on her face. It's hard to see a woman you once loved and had kids with fall apart like that. He said that, looking downcast. Amy, speaking with a mature tone, said,
Mom is not a child, so you don't need to carry her life either.
5 years after the divorce. Amy was 14, and Lily was 12.
I shouldn't say this, but I'm glad my parents divorced and we got to live here. This feels like my real family.
Amy said, having become much more talkative and able to express her feelings. People with developmental disorders can struggle with imagination and reading social cues. It's hard for them to picture things from text, making reading novels difficult.
It's thanks to Grandma letting me read lots of comics. Comics have dialogue and expressions that make sense together, and they explain things well.
She laughed. Living with her, I was amazed to find how smart Amy was. Good memory is common in people with autism-type developmental disorders. She's intelligent and good at studying, but maybe her difficulty in understanding others' feelings makes her easily misunderstood. My husband says, I bet Amy will grow up to be a doctor or a lawyer. But Amy herself says, I want to be a cartoonist. Can I make it?
Indeed, your drawings are so good, you might just do it.
I'd be thrilled if my granddaughter became a cartoonist. When you search for famous people with developmental disorders, you find quite a list. Of course, their success isn't because of their disorders. It's their own effort and support from others that matter. Still, seeing successful people with such challenges, I hope it helps reduce some of the weird discrimination and prejudice. Wouldn't it be nice if everyone had an instruction manual? Amy sure has a way with words. Whether you have a developmental disorder or not, everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. Compatibility matters too, and knowing these things in advance would make life easier for many. Recently, Amy drew a family portrait for us. It was so wonderfully done that I was moved to buy a frame and hang it in the living room. Amy was shy, but seemed happy about it. Seeing this, my husband chuckled and said, maybe she could become a painter. His pride in his granddaughter knows no bounds. And I'm just as smitten. We don't know what the future holds for our granddaughters, but we want to support them in any way we can.